science, and I'm going to bring in our guest for the week. We are joined tonight with our guest, Dr. Clare Fieseler, a scientist and journalist whose work focuses on people coping with a changing ocean and a warming world. Recently, Clare has been doing a series of reports on offshore wind turbines for, as I'm reading the notes, Canary Media. Clare is
You got
recipient.
it.
I got it. Yes, Clare is a recipient of the Eric and Wendy Schmidt Award for Excellence in Science Communication, a National Geographic explorer, and also does research through the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. You can find Clare's work in National Geographic, NPR, Vox Grist, The Washington Post, Politico, and Canary Media. Welcome to the show, Clare.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Yeah, so background for everybody who is watching. I came across you and your work specifically because of something we have in common, which is the AAAS Mass Media Fellowship.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're because of the fellowship, we are in a Slack together. And Clare mentioned that you mentioned that you'd been working on a story related to somebody involved in wind turbines, and I was or wind energy generation, and I was immediately interested because we've been following energy and sustainable energy and the development of not just opposition to, but the actual development of offshore wind for the last couple of decades, because it is a big deal. So, how did you get into wind? I mean, climate, ocean, wind.
Like going back,
I'm sure you've got your particular story. Yeah.
So I grew up in New Jersey, and like all great people do, and I one of my earliest memories is as a young kid. I was probably about 4 years old, and remember we couldn't go to the beach. Most of my family lives on the Jersey Shore, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and we couldn't go to the beach because there was syringes, and this was known as like the syringe tide. You can it has its own Wikipedia page. It was this time in the 80s where there's just medical waste washing up on the beaches of New Jersey, and this is one of my earliest memories. Right. Fast forward about 15 years later, the exact same beach, and I'm a ocean lifeguard at the time, and I am paddling in the morning next to dolphins. The water is clear, the humpbacks have returned, and it's truly a story of environmental comeback. And I feel like there are so few of those stories of environmental comeback. But I got to witness one up close growing up. And so I was always really interested in the environment, and also feeling, I've always felt the pull of the ocean and having grown up near it. And so I went and got my PhD, and I was in academia for like 12 years. And it was the AAAS Mass Media Fellowship, the one that you did, that kind of pulled me from science into science journalism. And I've basically been doing it full time ever since. So that's kind of my background. And so I kind of, of course I dabble in all sorts of different things. I love science broadly. I find it fascinating, but given my druthers, I love focusing on the ocean and the climate and climate change. And this story that, I'm excited to talk to you about, which took me 3 years to report. It kind of brought those things together for me. So
I think that's one of the things also that when you read an article, you have no idea what time and effort went into the actual presentation of the article. So 3 years to find this article, and it's a great article. Honestly, I really appreciate it. And we'll get to it now that we've teased it quite a bit. But I thought it was so fascinating also, you going from studying animals, studying corals, studying the stuff in the water, and then now you're looking at people. How has that change been for you? Is it the same? Was it a shift?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I also studied people too when I was getting my PhD. So I have a PhD in interdisciplinary ecology, and I was studying at the time the policies people were putting in place to protect coral reefs. And so a lot of that
Okay.
was both social science and natural science.
Yeah.
So people have always been in the mix for me. And yeah, people are endlessly fascinating. So and
I
this
agree,
and
but
this person that I profiled for 3 years, he was one of the most fascinating people I had ever met, and he hadn't talked to basically any other reporters, and so being able to talk to him and and he was tremendously influential in offshore wind opposition and pushing back and trying to stop these wind farms from being built. But no one was interviewing him, or no one was trying to. And I don't know why he took an interest in me, but he did, and we developed a real friendship. Actually, he after I wrote the story, he responded, thanks for a balanced story. Here are a couple critiques,
yeah,
but all in all, I thought it was well written. I hope we can still remain friends, and I think we are.
it's
Um,
amazing.
but yeah, it's one of these stories that I'm so glad I get to talk to you about it, because people read about things in the news like, oh, Trump hates wind farms, but there's this whole other network and stories and narratives behind that are really interesting that people should know about. So
Stories that go back like as long as people have been trying to place wind farms and to create them here in the United States. So to set the stage for everyone, this last December was a particularly fraught time for the offshore wind industry. And mid-December, the U.S. government sent basically cease and desist letters to
Mm-hmm.
all of the developments that are
Mm-hmm.
underway in the United States. Um, can you give us a little bit of background and as to why did the U.S. government, not just Trump doesn't like windmills, but why all of a sudden go on this cease and desist vendetta against what is potentially a helpful form of sustainable energy?
That's a great question, and I will say we should not downplay Trump dislikes windmills, because that is a really large part of this. As we know, Donald Trump likes to hold grudges, and
Mhm.
an important piece of information that listeners and viewers should know is that Trump, before he was president, when he was, just a, you know, real estate mogul, and he has a couple golf courses, right? And he's got a golf course in Scotland.
Mhm.
And Scotland actually is one of the leaders in offshore wind farms. At any given time at nighttime, I think like half the country is running on offshore wind power, which is just incredible. Like running half your country off of wind power is insane.
And do you have, for perspective, do you have an idea of like how big Scotland would be versus like one of our states? Would that be like,
It's really hard because
is that
these
something that we
countries
could
are
do?
using different
Yeah.
amounts. Like their grids are set up
Yeah.
differently. You're using different amounts of energy.
Yeah.
But I will say that we're nowhere close to that. I think California during really sunny times is producing more solar energy than, and it has to burn some off. And so that's
Yeah.
the only
Don't
comparable
even
thing.
have enough storage for
Right.
all of the energy. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's something that's comparable. But Trump in Scotland. So there was a company called Vanderfall, and they wanted to build, they were they Norwegian, they're Scandinavian, and they wanted to build they had permits to build an offshore wind farm right near Donald Trump's golf course, and he thought it was going to be an eyesore. A lot of people don't like looking at them. I've seen them up close. I actually think they're like spectacularly. They're actually quite beautiful. But he didn't want them ruining the view of his golf course, and he fought them. He fought to stop these 4 windmills from being built, or maybe it was 11. Um, And like, and they are built right next to the golf course. Unlike in the United States, where you build them like 25 miles off in the horizon, you can barely see them on the horizon. Because of the way the continental shelf is, in Scotland, they build them really close to the coast,
Ah, that makes
and
sense.
so they're really close, within like a mile or two.
And there's
And
gonna be a noise, like the hum
no,
from
no,
no. Oh,
they
wow.
are so quiet. They're
Huh,
quiet, like they're quieter than a car. They're quieter than like a pickup truck driving down the street for sure.
that's
They're,
amazing.
they,
Okay.
yeah, they are so like when eerily quiet when you get up close to them. Frankly, actually, it's just offshore near a turbine in Virginia recently, and eerily quiet. Like you can just hear, all you hear is the gulls, when you're out bobbing in a boat next to them. Um,
Or
so
playing golf in
Trump,
Scotland. Yeah.
right? And so you can't hear them; you're just seeing them,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
Trump lost this legal fight. And not only did he lose the fight, and the windmills ultimately got built next to his golf course, but he had to pay the legal fees of the Scottish government,
Because he
and
lost. Yeah.
because he lost, yeah.
Yeah.
And he ended up tweeting about this like 60 times, in a row over like the course of a couple months. Like this is the only thing he tweeted about for months.
Yeah. I remember. Yeah. It was a
And
lot.
this is like 2015. And
Mhm.
so he has just held this grudge and he will not let it go. And he kind of made it a campaign promise that he would build no new wind farms. And he's trying everything in his power, I believe, to make it happen. Um, so that element of these, federal attacks should not be downplayed at all.
But there's other opposition. Like there are stories, that have come out, like people in communities, they go,
Yes,
I don't want to look at them. And so
yes.
off Martha's Vineyards, that is like one that has been just so hard for years and years and years to get
Hmm.
placed, even though it's
Yes.
far away. Um, and of course that's people with the houses and property value and trying, but
Right.
with these ideas. And that's one perspective. But then there are other obstructive kind of stories that come about. And you have these groups that have in neighborhoods, local clubs that have popped up
Yeah.
fighting offshore
Yes.
wind.
So
Yeah.
people have always been against these. They don't like the way they look. They think it's going to decrease property values. There's a lot of misinformation that, they'll kill birds, they'll kill whales. People also don't like change, right? And so there has been resistance to these. Now, there has also been bipartisan support. So I think we need to realize that over the course of time, the past 20 years, yes, there have been opposition by coastal members and, cultural organizations, fishermen, but there's also been tremendous support too. So I'd say it's been like 50-50. Um, and, but I think what started to change a couple years ago is that um, the the political right started really organizing, and it went from like local communities, like a local commerce group or a local fishermen's group, and now it's a fossil fuel funded, you know
Yeah.
effort to oppose these, and they're sharing tips and tricks, and they're organizing across. and so
Yeah.
and so that's what started to tip the scales, and to spread information even further. And so it went from kind of like a traditional, we don't want this new bridge or pipeline, to something, in another stratosphere, frankly.
And so it's gone from something that was simply maybe local and regional politics
Hmm.
and preferences into something that is a much more layered and biased, situation where we have
Hmm.
actually federal government, corporate interests, and private money that are coming into play.
Yeah.
And
But one thing I want to say for like the science interested people
mhm,
here is like the reason why offshore wind farms are like really great is because like in the winter the wind is blowing a lot, and it's blowing at nighttime, which
Mm.
is like the time of day when the solar panels aren't activating. And also, if you remember, if you've ever been like in we're having a giant winter weather storm coming through the Northeast right
Yeah.
now. Gas plants fail all the time in extreme winter weather. Well,
Yeah.
guess what doesn't? Windmills.
Hmm.
Sorry, wind turbines.
Wind turbines,
Even
yes.
windmills like mill grain, and wind
Yeah.
turbines produce power. But
Yeah.
Trump's like his like windmill words have like penetrated into my brain.
I
And
think they've penetrated a lot of people's brains.
yes,
You know,
I know.
it's the way that words are used in popular culture and more often. And, you know, suddenly we're calling chat bots that have very limited information artificial intelligence, right? You
You're
know?
right. Right.
So, um,
But like from like an engineering perspective, like these
yeah.
things are great. And that's why like power grid operators love them, because they perform well when other, you know, like if you're truly an all of the above kind of like energy person,
Mhm.
you know, but like windmills do things that gas plants and solar just can't. So
So, but why offshore versus on land? Because I know, so I grew up, I'm on the West Coast. I grew up in California near the
Mhm.
Bay Area, where there's the Altamont Pass, and there's just beautiful the hills, and you've got these wind turbines that just go off into the distance, and it's just visually striking, and it creates so much power.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
you know, but why go offshore?
Well, I'll never forget when, like, the first time I went to California, which was like when I was an adult, and I was like, "What is this place?" Like, you know, I had spent almost my entire life on the East Coast, where
Yeah.
everything is so cramped, right? Like,
Mhm.
development is so. New Jersey is the most densely populated state in America. I mean, you go out west and you have these you have a lot of space,
Yeah.
frankly, and a lot of federal land. You know, you could put windmills on.
Mhm.
We don't have that on the East Coast,
Hmm.
right? But we have this really wide, shallow continental slope that basically is like 100 feet deep from like the shore out almost to 200 miles. In California, like it drops off deep really quickly. And it's actually really hard to build wind turbines out there. That's why the ones that they want to build in California are going to be floating turbines, which is really
Yeah.
interesting technology we can talk about.
Yeah.
And so on the East Coast, we're really limited on space. These are big pieces of infrastructure, and where are you going to put them? We
Mhm.
have some of the windiest, blusteriest, you know, offshore areas, and it's very shallow, and it's one of the perfect places in the world actually for offshore wind.
So, on that note, perfect placement. It's great. Everything sounds awesome. It sounds like, you know, how
And you
could
can build
wind
them very quickly. You can build them very
Yeah.
quickly.
So, enter David Stevenson, the main character of
Mhm.
your article who you spent 3 years writing and talking to and learning about. Why was he opposed? What happened?
So David Stevenson is he's a about he's in his 70s. He lives in Delaware. He's lived in Delaware almost his entire life, and he is a self-described conservationist, lifelong conservationist. And when I went to his house to visit him, he's got solar panels on his roof. He drives a hybrid car, and he has biked across the country. He loves it outdoors. Uh, but you know, he also kind of has like a libertarian streak to him. You know, he thinks that the government, you know, he really is I guess like, you know, fiscally conservative. He
Mhm.
wants the government kind of out of your business. And so that's, I think, has played a role in his political beliefs. But I think one of the main things is that very much like Trump, a offshore wind plan or blueprint kind of came to his doorstep. He lives very close to the beach in Delaware. He did not want, and him and his community did not want that for many reasons. He thought it would ruin the view, and they started to
Right?
fight it. And they were actually successful. They were really successful. Him and like this group of neighbors were really successful in delaying the building of an offshore wind farm in their community. And after that success, he was kind of like, I wonder if I could take these tips and lessons and export them to other places for other communities. And he just started cold calling other groups that he read about in the newspapers or like saw on Facebook, and it was like, here, I can help you. You're not a 501c3 yet. Let me help you set it up. Let me help you set up your legal funds. Let me provide you some legal funds to sue some of these companies. Let me help you, create mail-in flyers. Like at one point he had used like those, these are really popular in New Jersey and Delaware, like it's almost like an advertisement attached to the back of like a low flying plane. And it advertises for let's create, advertisements.
It's one of those things where it's like somebody, will you marry me over a baseball, a baseball game?
Come to DJ Wow's foam party tonight at the beach, party. And so like he had all these like tips and they would and he also was bringing, he worked at a think tank, a fossil fuel backed think tank, and so he had funds and influence, and he started bringing it to these people that were otherwise just kind of community members with yard signs.
It just seems so counter to everything else about him. It's your own community. You didn't want it. You stopped it from happening. But why get so invested in this entire process of blockading and stopping stuff in other communities? Why go that far?
Yeah, and a lot of people didn't take the time to ask ask people, because it's not as simple, I think, often as we think. And one of the things I try to avoid as a journalist is to avoid oversimplification and to avoid tropes and to avoid villainizing people. No matter what you think they might have done, they all have their reasons, right? They all have their values. And ultimately, even though he was a conservationist, he was just really dead set on, he thought nuclear power was the future. And it is carbon free. Now, it does have a toxic waste problem, right? And it's expensive to build. But he was like, this is what makes the most sense financially. And that's what he wanted. But he was really bad at promoting nuclear power, and he was really good at crushing offshore wind.
That is wild. Yeah. I'm nuclear power plants take 30 to 50 years to get approved, permit, build, bring online.
10 to 15, yes.
But it can take a very long time to make a nuclear plant work. There's the nuclear waste issue, and then also the question of why put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
So
yeah,
these are very interesting questions for somebody who seems thoughtful and intelligent and is doing what he thought was best.
Yeah. He's a really smart guy, and he really believes that what he's doing is right. But the one other thing I want to say about his journey, which I describe in the article, is when I met him, he actually invited me to a climate change conference in Orlando, and that was and I describe it in the article. When climate change conference, it's almost like that title is ironic, because it was a summit for people who don't believe in climate change, right? And it was like all the classic climate deniers that you've ever heard about were there. And
it wasn't the American Geophysical Union,
no, it was the Heartland Institute's climate conference, where they go to debunk climate change. And Stevenson turns to me at one point, kind of whispers, cheekily, he's like, I might be the only person here who believes in climate change. And I was like, well, what are you doing here then? And he was willing to kind of compromise some of those values for these other things, these other goals he had, which
Mhm.
was nuclear.
Mhm.
And he didn't believe a lot of the misinformation that his groups and network put forth at the beginning when I met him, like about wind power killing whales, right? He actually didn't believe it at all.
Mhm.
He was like, the jury's still out. We need to find the evidence. But he was stunned to know that that kind of like soundbite, wind power
Yeah.
is killing whales, was getting a lot of attention from Fox News. Even traditional news outlets like the Associated Press were kind of picking it up and like trying to, assess it, their its validity. And for years he had toiled kind of on the margins of this campaign, and no one, even people in the mainstream Republican Party, were paying attention to him. But then once the wind and whales uh, narrative started to grow and metastasize, people were really paying attention.
Mhm.
And so when I first met him, he kind of was just like, oh, wow, I don't support this narrative, but I'm not going to shut it down because it's bringing people to the conversation.
Yeah.
And then I talked to him many times over 3 years, and by the end, he was really embracing it. He had come to embrace this thing that he at one point really kind of saw as a false claim.
Hmm.
And it just, I think, goes to show, he's not alone. Like, he's part of this larger embrace of conspiratorial thinking that's kind of taken hold of our country. And so it was really interesting to follow his journey through that. Yeah, kind of even to the end. So
Did your conversations and the way that you interacted around those facts, about those points that were being used for marketing, did they change over the years?
they did, yeah. Because I think at the beginning he had a belief that that federal scientists would come to would gather, take the time, gather the data, come to a conclusion. And he lost trust in that process. He lost trust in
Mm.
government. Um, uh, and then started turning to other scientists. Like, he sent me like a report by like a computer scientist. I was like, this is not a whale specialist, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think like trust is a big issue. When you no longer trust the experts, where do you go for information? And I think a lot of people have wrestled with that over the years, and we all have people in our family who have lost trust in experts, whether it's from COVID-19 or people in your community, and you're asking questions about vaccines, don't know where to get their information from. This is this larger problem we have with trust in science and trust in experts. And I saw it with him. And it was just so interesting to see kind of from this, we talk about vaccines, we talk about climate change, but like this kind of like particular clean energy angle was so interesting and unique. And I found it endlessly fascinating.
So he's moved into nuclear now, and he's
Mm.
not working in offshore wind.
Yeah, he
And
left it
so
behind.
and so do you think in leaving it behind, he's also able to go, "Okay, I'm gonna put those ideas and that community behind me, and now I'm focusing on nuclear," and,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
now he can, like, open up his mind again to
I think he's
scientific
returning
ideas,
to
yeah,
the scientific ideas that he's always wanted. I think
yeah,
the whole anti-offshore wind movement kind of got away from him
yeah,
a little bit, you know.
yeah,
It took a lot on a life of its own, and it was really fueled by President Trump's rhetoric. And I think he was happy to kind of close the door on it, frankly. Yeah. And I wish him the best. And
yeah.
there is a place for nuclear, just like,
And if he can figure out how his, like,
yes.
opposition to wind, if he can figure out how to turn that around on nuclear,
I know.
go, do it,
I know.
yes.
Yeah. I mean, small module nuclear reactors, like
Yeah.
there's a place for them, just like there's a place for geothermal, just like there's a place for
Mhm.
solar. We need all of
Yep,
these. We need all of these solutions, basically.
yep,
Um, but but I think that the outcome of his campaign mixed with Donald Trump's rise to power has been a total crushing of the offshore wind sector. And
yeah,
I don't know how it comes back within the next 10 years.
yeah, and so that was the next question. The title of the article is a bit hyperbolic, maybe. I don't know. The man behind the fall of offshore wind. Is offshore wind dead? Do you see it coming back? Is it just slowed down?
So I wrote another article right after I published the piece about David Stevenson, and it was how Trump dismantled a promising industry and what America lost. And it was kind of my swan song for covering this beat. I covered only offshore wind basically for an entire year. And yeah, that's the article right there. And I really urge you to, if people have been like, oh, I didn't know anything about offshore wind, and now I want to know more, read this article. And it's kind of an analysis of everything that's happened over the past year with Trump's political assault on it, and kind of what states who were really banking on offshore wind, what they've lost. And truly, because these projects rely on investment, a lot of banks don't want to invest in them because, Trump's unpredictability makes it not a sound investment. And
yeah, that is just a commonality across a lot of sectors right now.
yeah, and so in speaking to like these energy analysts, that they this is what they do. They look at the market. They're like, there's just no way we're going to see investor trust return to this market until Donald Trump has left the presidency, and even then, it's going to take time for to return. So they predict no new wind farms will be built in America until 2035. So that's 10 years. So
that's new wind farms being built.
Wind farms.
However, there are a large number that were already underway, and there were some that were basically completed, getting ready to be started. You said you were in Virginia at the wind farm there. It's minimal, but are those going to be allowed to get started again? Is the cessation going to be like this, the ceasing of action that was ordered? Is it going to continue, or?
So when Trump came into office, there was only one large-scale offshore wind farm operating in America. And even though things had been in the works for 20 years, it was really like Trump came in just as this industry was taking off. There were a dozen that had been approved and were about to take off, and 40 leases that had already been purchased. So we can imagine like up to 40 offshore wind farms could have been built in the next 15 years.
Which would be so amazing. Which
would be incredible. And the ones that are essentially currently underway, there's 5. And I think it's, if you put them together, they would produce enough power to power all of Manhattan, and which is a lot. I mean, like there's like 6 million people that live in Manhattan, right? And so
but we're still looking gigawatts instead of terawatts.
Yes, we're still looking at gigawatts. Yeah. But also like tens and thousands of jobs too. Yeah. And so there's 5 of them, and one's in Virginia, and the rest are, one is in New York, and the rest are in New England. And those were paused by Trump on like December 20th. They got this, like, as you mentioned, this kind of cease and desist. And all of them, I think, sued. And within the past week, 3 federal judges have lifted the order. This is the article I wrote about the
cease and desist.
The cease and desist, essentially the stop work orders. And since I wrote this article, it came out a couple of days before Christmas. It's now January 21st. 3 of those wind farms have been allowed, who have gotten temporary injunctions. Essentially, they can go forward as these lawsuits move through the courts. And so one is very close to being completed, Revolution Wind, and it might be completed before the suit gets done. So we might get these 5 wind farms built in the next 3 years. We might not. You know, I can see some of these companies abandoning these projects halfway completed because of the tremendous cost, which is really, really hard for. These are two workers that I met in Virginia, by the way. There's been entire workforces that have been trained to build these things, right? Entire supply chains have been built within the country to start to serve these projects,
to build up this capacity. Yeah.
And those were all kind of wither away. Now Canada is launching their first offshore wind farms, and they kind of want to make use of that workforce, and they want to make use of that supply chain, and that's going to be really interesting. And they actually want to service some of that power, because they already service hydropower. They sell it to us, and so maybe they could sell us some of the wind power we never built. So that's something I'm like tracking in the coming years. Canada perhaps taking up the baton on this, but yeah, it's a really interesting story of like this huge engineering, accomplishment that we had made. I mean, each of these turbines are as tall as the Hoover Dam. And there's 176 that were about to be built off the coast of Virginia. Now they won't be. And or now they may be, they won't be, who knows?
It's up in the air.
It's up in the air. And I know it's just one of the many things that the Trump administration has ground to a halt that we're progressing in America. But people should care about it. People should care about it because renewable energy, creates jobs, cleans the air, lowers emissions, and is more reliable.
Yeah.
And those are things that we all want, so.
Yeah, a better environment, a better energy future for ourselves and our future generations. There is so much there. I think I agree. People should care. And thank you so much for joining me tonight. I know you're on the East Coast, and so it's late where you are. I'm keeping you up late with this interesting topic. Is there anything you want to quickly, if there is anything you haven't talked about that you want to share with the audience before you go?
Well, I was just going to say, I'm really active on Blue Sky, and you can find me on Blue Sky. My name, my last name, Fieseler, Fieseler, on Blue Sky. And I'm writing a book about ocean industries and penetrating deeper into our ocean and farther into our ocean, much farther than just offshore wind. And so look for that. But yeah, I love nerding out about science and science topics and the environment. So always happy to connect with readers. And if you read my story and you like it, please reach out and tell me. And then I can send that to our funders, and because this was all funded by philanthropic organizations that believe in environmental journalism and journalists. So it's good to
and investigative journalism that's long-term, and you're doing some deep work. It's essential because we don't get these stories otherwise. All of the stories that we brought up tonight, I will link to on the TWIS website in our show notes. And I look forward to seeing your book when it comes out, and hopefully getting you back on the show to talk some more.
Wouldn't that be great? Can I come back?
Yes, please. All right.
Let's sit 2.5 years from
tonight. All right. I'm setting my
put on the calendar.
Setting my clock, setting an alarm. Yeah. Everyone, Clare Fieseler, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Have a wonderful evening. Get a good night's sleep.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Well.
Take care.
Good night. Hey, everybody. So we are going to keep going because I do have a bunch of stories for you. Not a lot, because we did have the interview and I was saving room for Blair to have some stories also. So I've got a few stories for you, but right now in this very moment, let me just say thank you very much for joining me here for This Week in Science. If you enjoyed this interview, if you enjoy the stories that we bring every week, please head over to twis.org and consider becoming a part of the Patreon community. consider looking at some of those Zazzle products in our store for some of our merchandise that can help support the show and promote the show to people who don't know about it. What's that? What's that picture? What's TWIS? And you can tell everybody all about it. It's so great. It's your support that really keeps this show going. We are supported by you, the listeners. So thank you for your support. I really can't do it without you. TWIS.org. That's where